people won't stop talking about uber prospect Bo Nickal, the former Penn State All-American wrestler, national champion, two-time winner on the Dana White Contender Series level. We know he now has a UFC contract. We know Jamie Pickett will be his debut early December, the final pay-per-view of the year in Las Vegas. But Luke, you get those same emails from every up-and-coming overseas betting site that's like, hey, check out the odds. What about Bo Nickal versus Khamzat? What about Bo Nickal versus Adesanya? We'll get to that growing sort of conversation here, but Bo Nickal has been very active on Twitter, following up on his post-fight call-out 2 Tuesdays ago that he wants Khamzat or he wants Logan Paul, 2 different sides of the spectrum there. But in regards to Khamzat Chimaev, let's set this stage. Here's Bo Nickal's tweet. I wanted to get your reaction here, Luke. He's saying, there's levels to this game. Y'all, I realize Khamzat is one of the best fighters right now. That's why I have to fight him. I want to be the best in the world. That means I have to beat the best guys. This is fun for me. I'm born for this. That was in reaction to people being like, you know, what the hell are you doing? You don't even have a official UFC fight, and now you're calling out the best. Luke, I want to get your reaction to how realistic is it, the idea of this guy actually fighting the best and fighting them soon. You've been very vocal on this show in saying, like, we could ruin this kid. This could be Sage Northcutt all over again if we throw him to the wolves. It feels like everybody wants to throw this guy to the wolves. Before you react, let's hear yesterday MMA Fighting's Damon Martin went public with this bold statement. I can't wait to hear Luke's reaction. Let's hear it. All right, technical difficulties there with the audio. We'll get to in a second. Luke, that's more in the Adesanya direction. Let's open and stay right here in the actual Khamzat Chimaev mention. We talked earlier that there's this potential. Is he stuck in Russia? Is he not? You hear different sides of the ball. But early odds makers are basically putting Bo Nickal as a plus 330 underdog should this mythical fight ever happen. Khamzat opened at minus 400. He's now down to minus 300. Bo recently down to plus 250. I mean, is this just filler for a slow week? How good is Bo Nickal right now? How quickly should they actually match him? Because people are talking.
Well, he's got to fight Jamie Pickett, so we don't even have to worry. This is, whoa, I heard some audio in my ear there. So he's going to fight Jamie Pickett, so I guess we'll see with the better test there. I do expect him to run over Jamie Pickett one way or the other, although we will find out. I do think it's worth backing up a step first, BC, and asking a very basic but really important question, namely, in terms of collegiate wrestling credentials. Now, that would obviously exclude anyone who didn't compete in the United States in that space. So, you know, Yoel Romero obviously did incredibly well on the freestyle circuit. But we're talking about just collegiate wrestling, which, by the way, is folk style. It's similar to, but a little bit different than freestyle. And I actually think it's a better transition point to MMA than freestyle wrestling, all things being what they are. But here's what I would say. Who has the best pure collegiate wrestling credentials in UFC history? So among all UFC fighters, who did the best in college? Now, it's somewhat debatable, and there's no one clear answer, but for sure, Bo Nickal has a claim to that, right? Yeah. So there were 8 major tournaments he competed in, 4 national championships, and then 4, I think, Big Ten championships. He won 3 national titles, got silver 1 year. He won 3 Big Ten titles. He got bronze 1 year, right? So in every conference or national tournament, he claimed a title. There are other fighters who have 3 titles. Mark Schultz has 3 national titles. Jake Rochalt has 3 national titles. Kevin Randleman had 2, but then was ruled ineligible, so he potentially could have had 1. There's a bunch that had 2, Johnny Hendricks and so forth. But also Ben Askren had 2, but only lost to the same guy, I think, twice. So he got silver 2 years, and well, you know, a runner-up or whatever. And then,
you know, DC would have been a stud if it wasn't for Cael Sanderson and John Jones, right? I mean,
that's right. Fair. Well, he also competed in an era where Cael Sanderson, who didn't lose a match in all of college, was in the same time that Daniel Cormier was there. He probably would have had a national title, maybe 2 as well, but he doesn't, so I can't count him in this conversation. But in terms of credentials in wrestling in the United States, Bo Nickal has a claim to being the very best out of college among UFC fighters. Again, it's a little bit debatable, but he's in that. I mean, there's 3 names you could probably put on that list, and he's one of them. Maybe 4 if you want to throw in Askren and do it there. And by the way, like I was talking to Damon Martin about this, Bo Nickal didn't lose a match ever after his sophomore year. He went undefeated his junior year. He went undefeated his senior year. I cannot explain to you how fucking insanely difficult that is to do. So that's who we're talking about here.
Than Ed Ruth was, who's now with Bellator and having an up and down MMA run. Was he similarly decorated to Nickal?
Ed Ruth. So I talked to a guy who covers collegiate wrestling for his job, and he told me Ed Ruth is one of the top 10 collegiate wrestlers of all time.
Okay.
Of all time. His record, he has 3 national titles and then one. He got silver in 1 year. He has all 4 Big Ten championships. So every year he competed in the Big Ten championship, he won it. That would actually make him slightly better than Bo Nickal in terms of the overall resume. Now, there's the Hodge Trophy, which, by the way, Ben Askren has 2 of them. Bo Nickal got 1.
Is that the Heisman? The Heisman
well, the Heisman would go to just football. But yes, it's considered to be the overall best wrestler independent weight class that year, right? So,
yeah.
But Ben Askren got it twice. And Ben Askren was a prolific pinner as well, which is kind of hard to do. So again, it's somewhat debatable, but there's no denying if you had to make a list of the very, very few that could occupy that space, Bo Nickal is in it. That's the kind of talent we're talking about here. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is, I would really love to react to.
We have it. Let's go to it right now.
Let's play the Damon Martin clip if we can get that ready.
Right now, if they put Bo Nickal, something weird happens. Alex Pereira gets injured, and they say, you know what, Bo Nickal, you're getting a title shot against Israel Adesanya on November 11th. Bo Nickal beats Israel. Bo Nickal beats Israel Adesanya right now. Right now, Bo Nickal beats Israel Adesanya. I think Chimaev's a tougher fight because Chimaev actually has the wrestling. Bo Nickal beats Israel Adesanya right now. He out wrestles him. I pick him to beat him.
So I'm going to assume that the audience could hear that. I could not.
I hope they could have. I couldn't. I hope they could have heard it there. Luke, here's the deal. Here's how I want to set it up to you. If anyone didn't hear it, Damon Martin just said right now he believes Bo Nickal would defeat Israel Adesanya in a UFC match. Okay, they did. Thank you, Geff. Luke, that's
bold.
Extreme. How do you react? Because this is different than saying, what if he fought Khamzat? What would be the odds? No, you have a prominent major MMA reporter who's got a lot of weird stuff behind him, right? Shout out to Damon Martin right there. There's like masks. I mean, there's creatures and stuff. I mean, I got weird shit too, Luke,
he's big into nerd culture. He's got that site.
It turns out. Movement. But look, Damon Martin's respected. You hear that voice. You hear it all the time interviewing fighters. He's now saying today, tomorrow, whenever you want to book it, Bo Nickal would become the next UFC middleweight champion. How do you respond? Because that's a grenade, Luke. That's ridiculous.
All right, so here's what I'm going to say. I think ultimately I cannot agree with Damon Martin. I think it's a little too extreme for a couple of reasons. One, there's just no real basis to know that. He hasn't beaten any established middleweight fighters to give you a clearer sense of where he actually is. He looks obviously amazing, beating up the guys that he did, and his last opponent was a quality opponent, but he's a quality opponent within the regional MMA circuit. I think he will make it to the big show one way or the other, but you get the idea. We're not talking about someone who has a demonstrated ability to overmatch proven, established top-tier talent in his respective division. So that's the first part. I think the second part I would say is there is way too much unknown about Bo Nickal to have that kind of confidence. For example, we actually don't know what his cardio is going to look like. Right? Wrestling, he obviously did extremely well, but wrestling, you're going in these short, intense bursts. It's not much. The MMA fighting is a little bit more long-term. It's a little bit more, you have to have that cardio that lasts for long periods of time, especially if you have a very good resisting opponent. We don't know. We also don't know how he takes a shot. We don't know if he loses composure. We don't know if he's got a good ability to absorb damage. We don't know how much that rattles his capacity for staying focused and, when we talk about Nogueira, composure under fire. We just don't have any answers to these questions. And so for that reason, it's simply way too early to say something like that. However, I understand the spirit a little bit of what Damon Martin is saying. I also believe that the kind of threat, again, we are sort of extrapolating here based on a very limited data set, But based on what we have in that limited data set, he seems to have some of the tools that are just all championship caliber ability. He does seem to have very good athleticism. He's got a ton of experience. You can see he's not rattled at all under those lights insofar as he's been exposed to them. His ability to show natural aptitude with jiu-jitsu, which by showing leg dexterity and then using submission so rapidly, dude, that's not automatic. That's like the fact that he got it that quickly is shocking. And then to see how effortless he looks with feints and fakes and distance management, and he's got decent punching power as well. He just seems to have the kind of makeup that screams fighting for a UFC title. Could he beat the very best guy in the division today? I seriously, in that sense, I have my doubts. Also, should be noted, we keep doing this. Everyone's like, oh, he would take Izzy down and maul him. Well, yeah, in a pure wrestling match, that's probably true. And maybe he could get Izzy down. But I just keep going back to this. Dude, the middleweight champion today has super underrated takedown defense. I don't know how many times I need to say this. The tape shows it. The statistics show it. There are issues you might want to say flat on his back, such that he is put there. And of course, you could say maybe Nickal could do that. The other part we talked about previously, BC, which I think you definitely agree with, which is that maybe Nickal goes up there and does something impossible. But if you get knocked out at that stage, you risk fucking up a guy's development because you just didn't take the appropriate caution early. So there's all kinds of reasons to say that I think Damon Martin's getting a little bit ahead of himself. But I do understand the spirit of enthusiasm around a very, very, very rare, frankly, historic kind of prospect in the sport.
Look, I'm normally the guy that leans into this. I'm the guy who, when, Khamzat Chimaev won those 3 fights in succession in 2020 before the COVID issues he had, and even after he came back, who did he blow away, Khamzat, when he came back? Was it the Leech?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Even after that, I'm the guy coming on here. Look, it's not traditional. It may damage him in the long run, but this guy's so overwhelming. Could you imagine him in a title shot right now? I said the same thing when Johnny Walker was blowing away guys in less than 30 seconds. And oh, by the way, if he hadn't been stopped by Corey Anderson, we found out by interviewing Corey Anderson on Room Service Diaries that Walker was going to get the next chance at John Jones in that moment. So I'm normally the guy that is ready to entertain this. But we're talking about a guy who's had 2 20-second fights, more or less. And now we're saying let's go to the 5-round level against arguably the pound-for-pound king, who is on his way to becoming one of the all-time greats. Like, that's disrespectful to the champion. That's disrespectful even to Bo on this rise. But, Luke, there is some level of boxing comparison here. Do you remember the name Pete Rademacher? I don't know if you do, Luke, okay?
I can't say that I do.
He's an American who won the 1956 Olympic gold medal in heavyweight boxing. He made his pro debut in 1957. His pro debut against heavyweight champion Floyd Patterson. He lost. He didn't have much of a career after that. You look back on that as sort of this weird publicity stunt. We do remember Leon Spinks won the heavyweight gold in the Olympics, and in his, 7th fight, he upset Muhammad Ali to win the title. My point is, there have been times in history when you break glass in case of emergency, or not emergency, in case of excitement, because you got somebody that's so damn special. In the direction that I want to kind of say, okay, Damon Martin, are you being crazy? Well, look, Bo Nickal is 27. He's not 19, right? This isn't 17-year-old Rosas Jr. on the Contender Series. And yes, as you pointed out, he has proven, boy, when the lights are the brightest, this guy delivers. This just feels like insanity. So, Luke, if you're leaning hard into okay, Damon Martin might be acting a little crazy, but what he's saying is not entirely crazy. If you're the UFC, what's the most aggressive move you think they're willing to make with Bo Nickal? Because it's, Jamie Pickett is a nice introduction here, right?
That's
but
right.
Let's say
That's
he
a great point.
blows away Jamie Pickett in 35 seconds. What are we doing next? Is there a chance if Adesanya beats Pineda that we're going Bo Nickal Adesanya, or is that just fucking ridiculous?
No,
what do you do next?
First of all, as long as Robert Whittaker is not champion, and so let's just leave it at that. As long as he's not the champion, nobody gets to a title without going through him. Period. Like, he is the ultimate proving ground. Just that's how it's going to be, number one. The second thing I would say is, let's answer your question, because I think it's actually the totally most appropriate question, which is, what happens if he just blows the fucking doors off of Jamie Pickett, like he did before, in less than a minute or a couple of minutes, and it's just, 10-7 until the stoppage happens, that kind of a round. I think you have to give him someone inside the top 15. I do. If you're running over guys like that easily and that quickly, you still need someone who can help you answer the question of, okay, but what happens if he gets pushed to the second round? What happens if he gets pushed to the third round? Here's another one. This sounds kind of crazy, but it shouldn't be. What if somebody actually can stop his takedowns? What if somebody rocks him? What if somebody hurts him? By the way, here's another thing too. What if he has a unique susceptibility to body shots? These are all things we just don't have answers to. And I know what folks say is, well, yeah, but if he's this good of an athlete and blah, 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 you don't have to worry about those questions. Let me explain something to you. Over the course of someone's career, they are audited. Everyone has weaknesses. And until you have clear reason to know that A or B is not a particular weakness, but C or D might be, you have to take those potential threats and risks seriously, especially if they're only 3 fights in to their career. So what I think you have to do is you still have to slow play it, but you have to give him somebody ranked 13, 14, 15. I'll pull up the rankings here to see who that might be. But that's where my head is at. What about you,
well,
BC?
there's a different, so there's levels to rankings. Right now, Brad Tavares, who has a fight coming up against RoboCop, Gregory Rodriguez, he's ranked number 15. If Pickett gets blown away and they went like the Brad Tavares direction, you would think, okay, that's we're doing it slow, but but rapidly. There's levels though to the top 15. You got Tavares at 15, but then you got guys in the top 10, Luke, who are former title contenders and killers. I mean, for example, Darren Till's got a fight coming up against Dricus Duplessis. Did I get that right, Luke? Dricus. Let's say Darren Till won that. I think he's already been tweeting about Bo. He's always tweeting about people. I mean, is Darren Till versus Bo Nickal in 5 months from now too much too soon? Because this is the ultimate question, Luke, because it's not about whether we believe. It's about Dana and to some degree ESPN and Disney. Because if you're going to fast track somebody like Leon Spinks did, like I kind of was pushing them to do Chimaev, there's huge excitement in what we don't know. If you did Adesanya versus Bo Nickal, the whole thing would be, we have no idea how great this guy is. We're going to find out against the very best. I mean, that's ridiculous in theory because how are you even going to prepare in practice? I know he's with ATT. I know Bo's been taking it slow to do it right and gain the skills he needs. How do you even prepare for an Israel Adesanya? You don't. But the intrigue is we don't know what the hell it's going to look like. Typically, entering a fight, we kind of know what it's going to look like. It's one of those rare things. Is Darren Till, the idea of a Darren Till-like opponent next, is that too far, too much, too soon? Or
Dude, you skipped over several more interesting names. Chris Curtis would be an interesting name, first of all. But before Darren Till, in that, if you're going 15 up, how about Andre Muniz? Right? We keep talking about, he's got devastating wrestling. He can take whoever he wants down. Yeah, good luck taking him down. Find out what happens when you take Andre Muniz. Muniz on the ground has a nasty ground game and a very prolific guard on top of it. That is something that would be very difficult.
By mentioning Muniz or Curtis, both very good fighters, not here to disrespect them, is there's not a ton of sex factor to match with Bo because you'd be doing an experiment. You're basically taking a guy who's got no experience and throwing him to the wolves. Wouldn't you want to throw it to a wolf that... I mean, say what you will about Darren Till. The guy gets you to take notice of his fights. So there is a responsibility to the promoters if they're going to fast track him, and boy, does it seem like they are, to really make each step up a big event, Luke. Bo Nickal versus Muniz, not a big event.
Okay, but dude, Bo Nickal versus Jamie Pickett is not a big event.
But this is debut. This is day one. This is job one. I don't know.
Also, there's a grappling match, I think it's a couple of years old. I have to go back and look exactly when it happened. Gordon Ryan had a grappling match, again, submission grappling, so not wrestling, against Bo Nickal. He triangled Bo Nickal quickly. Now of course that's Gordon Ryan. He's insanely good. I'm just sort of pointing out I have seen the Predator bleed, and this is my other point too, BC. It's like, dude, here's the reality about where Bo Nickal is. Again, everything he has shown has just been magic. We've never even seen him take a punch to the face.
Yes.
Right? We've never even seen him take a punch to the face. Brad Tavares has very good takedown defense and obviously, prefers to slug it out, trains with a good camp, highly experienced. Let's see how he looks against a guy like that before we make proclamations about how poor we think Izzy's takedown defense is,
An obvious other comparison would be Vasily Lomachenko, who wanted to fight for a world title in his pro debut after winning 2 Olympic gold medals. Fought in his second fight, lost a disputed decision to Orlando Salido. But it didn't break him, Luke. He came back and won a world title against unbeaten Gary Russell Jr. in the next fight. So there are special guys where, look, there is a scenario, Luke, where you could do something crazy like throw Bo Nickal to Adesanya, and he loses, shows well, and grows from it. There is that potential, but I don't know. I mean, I didn't expect the hype, even though he's been nothing short of dynamic, right? Nothing short of perfection. I did not expect the hype combination of people like Damon Martin making that bold of a claim on that type of platform, or even Bo himself being this aggressive and coming after Chimaev. I mean, I don't know if people look at, some people criticize us of suddenly downgrading Chimaev because of one time missing weight, but there's a lot of extenuating weird circumstances. Would it surprise you, Luke? Okay, maybe we should shelf the Adesanya conversation for a second. How surprised would you be if Khamzat Chimaev versus Bo Nickal was a pay-per-view UFC main event in the first 6 months of next year?
Ooh. Boy,
because that's an aggressive move. It's short of the title, but that's an aggressive damn move right there.
Okay, let's punt one more month, because July would be International Fight Week. So by July, International Fight Week, having a Nickal versus Chimaev main event.
Well, that would be a co-main if you did it IFW week. You know it would be, Luke.
Not necessarily. There's all kinds of ways it could be. I know what you're saying, but okay. How surprised would I be? I'd be surprised. I put that at a fairly significant surprise factor. Wouldn't rule it out. I mean, that's unlikely. Listen to what I'm saying. It's unlikely. But because here's the other part too. We talked about Ed Ruth. How good was Ed Ruth? Ed Ruth is, again, an exceptional wrestler in college, and he hasn't been exactly, he's done well in MMA.
Yeah,
but
he can't figure out whether he should be a wrestler or a striker, Luke. He can't figure it out, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, lost to Neiman, who's a good fighter too as well. Or Neiman Gracie, what am I saying? Gracie.
Grayson Neiman. Great guy.
Gracie Neiman. The department store, Neiman's.
Yeah.
Neiman Gracie. But the point I'm trying to make here is, he hasn't, if you thought, oh my God, it must be a corresponding thing. If you're that good in college, you will be this good in MMA. It's not necessarily a one-to-one thing. The only thing I would point out about Bo Nickal is the sophistication of his development is happening so fast that's what gives me confidence. Unbothered by the lights. He looks in certain ways like he's been doing this for a very long time. Solid fundamentals. But he's just untested against more dynamic, resisting opponents. And so for that reason, you just have to slow the roll a little bit. But I'll say this. Here's another question for you, BC. Let me spin it back. How likely is it Bo Nickal could fight for a title at some point in 2023?
Well, you know what might add to that, Luke? I've been on here saying all along that if Adesanya beats Pereira, Alex Pereira from Glory Kickboxing, if he beats him at an NYC MSG, I don't see him waiting around because, in my opinion, is Khamzat a real middleweight? I still feel like we don't know that. Is Khamzat still going after the welterweight title? I still feel like we don't know that. I didn't see an immediate another person who deserves it, who's knocking on that door. He beat Whitaker twice, whether I agree with the judges or not, right? I think the move for Adesanya, if he wins this, or even to some degree if he loses it without the need for an immediate rematch, is to go to 205. But could, Luke, this changes this question you asked. If Chimaev ends up being a career middleweight after this, and if Bo Nickal blows through Pickett in December, which would mean they can bring him back quickly because they're, didn't accrue damage, and then let's say in March, goes in there against a Brad Tavares, a Curtis, even a Darren Till, to be fair, and wins. Forget about 30 seconds, but wins. Dude, the hype may be high enough where you might not be able to leave him out of the title picture. So under my scenario of Adesanya, let's say he beats Pereira and then goes to 205, now you've got the opportunity for a vacant title, Luke. And in my opinion, Robert Whitaker has claimed the other half of that vacant title shot. But who does he fight? It's going to get really interesting. But what would fuel it getting crazy interesting is whether ESPN, Dana, Disney, whoever's calling shots here in the larger picture, do they look at Bo Nickal as the same marketing force that Khamzat became at the recent peak of his hype? Do you look at Bo Nickal, Luke, as the type of person, I mean, look, let's be fair. We kind of laughed when Brendan Schaub called him the Great White Hope. It's not really applicable, but maybe
also not really a compliment. That's the other part.
Yeah.
Of it.
But is he trying to say that, you've got this like middle America, cool looking white guy with the red hair and I mean, is that a guy that you think if he keeps blowing people away is going to have Khamzat level hype in 6 months? What do you think?
Yes. So people forget this. I got asked this question on my live chat maybe a few weeks ago, and there was a point I was trying to make about what kind of athlete the UFC wants to favor and present to the public. Folks may forget this. Post Ultimate Fighter, the UFC, and understandably, I don't say this in a pejorative way whatsoever. You can understand from a marketing angle why you would want to do this. They made a really strong effort to kind of distance themselves from the more aggressive, potentially unsavory elements around, let's say, MMA more generally. Cage fighting is what it was called at the time anyway. So in other words, they would promote the fact that Rich Franklin was a math teacher before he got into MMA, that Chuck Liddell might have the mohawk, but he has an accounting degree. And they really promoted St. Pierre a lot. Why? St. Pierre was not wearing T-shirts and jeans to pressers. He was wearing suits. He presented himself as the kind of athlete that you would more accustomed to be seeing in the kind of buttoned up, quite literally, polished other more professional sports. And they really needed a guy like that at that time. St. Pierre wasn't just very good for the era that he competed in. He was the kind of prototype that the UFC needed to give as a public-facing fighter that they could trot out, and the public could be like, oh, these guys aren't all complete savage and deranged and whatever else. And of course, the truth is obviously more complex than that. Now, we're in a somewhat different era. In fact, what I would say is the UFC will 100%, no doubt about it, they will use the fact that this guy went to Penn State and did really well there. But, people kind of respond to the story of college athletes with a little bit more sympathy than they would even sometimes the hard Scrabble stories of guys from the street, whether that's fair or not. It's an easy sell to the public, and the fact that he achieved at such a high level makes that even easier. Plus, you got to remember, if you're Bo Nickal, you've been talking to cameras. By the way, he won 3 state titles in high school as well. He's been talking to cameras for a long time. Microphones have been in his face for a long time. He's very at ease with it. So what I would say is he's got a lot of the ingredients that are in place to make that work. The only missing piece was that, remember, Ronda, for example, could talk it up a little bit. She had a bit of a big mouth, kind of an edgy sort of competitor's mentality to her. You've seen flashes of that with Bo. I think he'd have to dial that up a little bit. But assuming he could do that, could he be a big star in the UFC? And again, where winning is the common denominator? Yeah, dude, I think he really, really could be. Yes.
What was his Olympic outcome, Luke? You named the credentials.
So he wrestled for a world team and didn't make it. Now, he got beaten by David Taylor. David Taylor also wrestled at Penn State. I think the match was competitive. I'd have to go back and double check. But David Taylor is an Olympic and world champion. Like, we're talking about, for example, when I covered wrestling more closely, which was about 10 years ago, here at American University, I saw the very first matchup in college between Kyle Dake and David Taylor. They were considered to be the two powerhouses. Penn State and Cornell were the two colleges that they represented. They wrestled at an NWCA event here in Washington, D.C., and I went and watched it. It was a big, big deal. That was kind of the era that came up, and now Dake ended up being a little bit better than Taylor kind of overall, and certainly during that era. But Taylor took off on the freestyle circuit eventually, and you can look at the success he's had since then. So he wasn't able to get past truly one of the best wrestlers in American history. Okay, no big deal there. But I don't know if his heart was in it or he just always had his sights on MMA. I don't know exactly what derailed him there, but it's better for us because he looks like he's a fucking monster.
All right, I wanted to get that cleared because I think you're right on your, sort of comparison there that it's kind of what an ESPN Disney would be looking for, this clean-cut looking American hero that can come from the royalty of amateur wrestling at the highest level and make that transition and clean up cage fighting a little. But Luke, isn't there potential royalty wearing a larger crown than even the one Bo Nickal brought into MMA? And that name is Gable Stevenson, fresh off
Stevenson.
Stevenson. I mean, it's the same thing as Stevenson, Luke. I mean, it's really the same thing. How am I pronouncing it wrong?
I don't think there's an extra syllable. I think it's just Stevenson, not
all right.
Stevenson.
Either way, we know that Gable was finishing out his final year with Minnesota on the amateur level after signing the deal with WWE. There was news yesterday from Mike Coppinger of ESPN that Gable is back training full-time at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando after undergoing surgery for a rare heart condition. He had an ablation last month, and now he's 100% healthy and pushing the main roster there. Luke, part of Gable signing with WWE did leave the door open, of like maybe one day coming over to MMA, and you'd have to believe if he did, it would be something big. Is that the only guy who could be in this Bo Nickal spot with even bigger clout in resume?
For several reasons. One, Gable Stevenson is a showman already, right? So you've already seen flashes of like his swag that he shows, and he's good on the microphone, and he likes to show up for the cameras. He does, flips and everything on the mat. So he's already got that a little bit more natural too. He doesn't quite have the same resume as Bo. He has 2 national titles, but in the freestyle circuit, he's got a gold medal in the Pan American Games, and obviously he got a gold medal in fucking Tokyo at the Olympic Games.
With 1 second left, Luke.
I know, just an unbelievable turn of events that this guy has had. So that's 2 factors. The third factor would be he's at heavyweight, which is a much, middleweight is not your toughest division, but heavyweight, definitely, if you're a dynamic athlete in the sort of way that Gable Stevenson is, he should have, again, we'll see, but he should have a lot of success in that department. So there's a lot of wind at the back, so to speak, of Stevenson that I think Bo Nickal has a lot of that too. Maybe not quite as much, but we'll have to see how things go.
Yeah, Bo Nickal seemingly though way farther ahead in terms of his MMA development. I mean, look, I'm not going to take away what he's done so far in the very short sample size. He's been dynamic. I gotta say, slow your roll on the Damon Martin level, even though I respect the aggressive call out. But the proof, Luke, ultimately it'll be in the pudding. You know that, Luke. Okay.